Good evening, and welcome back to the Psychedelic Cafe. I'm doing a series of talks on the subject When Heidegger Met Castaneda, the Psychedelic Odd Couple. And over the past 30 years, I've probably read this series of books by Carlos Castaneda 20 or 25 times, all these books. And so I'm well versed in what Castaneda had to say and what his thought was like. And in the past couple of years, I've been studying Martin Heidegger, a German philosopher from the 20th century. And I've noticed a striking correspondence between the ideas of Heidegger and the ideas of Castaneda that I think is important. And so let's set that stage with a little reading here, and then I'll go into more about all that. And this is called the Trinity Trifecta. The actinic flash lit up the early morning calm of the New Mexico desert, while the very best minds of all of Western science looked on. The ensuing shockwave blew Enrico Fermi's pant legs back, along with some scraps of paper he had dropped in order to estimate the power of the blast. He had the bits of paper prepared beforehand, just in case the thing went off. It did. On this momentous occasion, the dream of Sir Francis Bacon had been realized. Uranium ore had been sufficiently tortured to yield up the power of a star. The refinement of the analytic process and the power of reason had been wrought into the finest of scalpels to elicit the most primal cry from the very heart of matter. At this moment of apotheosis, some but not all of the scientists looked at each other sheepishly. Being the director of the whole project, it was only fitting that J. Robert Oppenheimer provide a memorable quote. And being the supremely cultured man he was, he broke the silence by quoting from the Bhagavad Gita. But what he really meant to say was shit. Science and reason had won the trifecta. In a single moment, it had overcome brute matter, achieved the power of a god, and landed itself in a complete dead end. So, one of the things I want to explain is why Heidegger and Castaneda and their meeting in an intellectual sense might be important. And the basics is, I think this culture is at a dead end. I think it's in a cul-de-sac. And it's at a cul-de-sac that I call rationalism. Not reason, but the ism around it. That rationalism is the only way one can see things. And I think if you argued that new ideas and a fresh approach to things would hurt, I don't see that's a case you can make. I will contend a number of things as we go along that psychedelics might help. I don't know of anything that could change one's mind or offer a fresh perspective or allow one to see around corners and into dark rooms that one has never seen before as a psychedelic experience. And that brings us to the first problem, which is this culture has never been very comfortable with the psychedelic experience. And I'll talk more about that, but it goes back probably further than Christianity, but certainly Christianity formally has suppressed anything to do with psychedelics whenever possible, starting with the destruction of the ritual at Eleusis in the late Greek era. And so that's the problem with psychedelics. Our culture doesn't accept them. And if you try to talk about Castaneda-style experiences, and you talk about, well, the shaman has this or that to say, Western intellectual types get the vision of of a witch doctor in a loincloth with a bone in their nose and a dried monkey head on a stick, and you're not entirely wrong that that's how they might look, but it doesn't go anywhere. And like a ball bearing rolling around in the porcelain bowl of a toilet, it just rolls around and around. There's nowhere for it to land. And so how Heidegger might help is that Heidegger offers a different way to see the world and does it in a philosophical language that is familiar to the Western mind. And so let's talk about the hermeneutical problems here that we face. We face three hermeneutical problems, and I'll go through them. And by hermeneutics, I mean, what would we like to know about a text, or what about a text would make it more understandable or useful that isn't in the text itself? That's what I mean by hermeneutics. And Heidegger's very good about defining his terms. So let's do the simplest one first, probably Heidegger. This is Heidegger's main work. This is called Being and Time, written in 1927, before he joined the Nazi Party. So the big problem in Heidegger is that he joined a Nazi Party. And there's a lot of people who want to say, well, we can't listen to anything Heidegger had to say because he was a goddamn Nazi. Well, fair enough. But I want to take Heidegger for what he had to say in this book, not for what he did later on. For one thing, this book was, like I said, published in 1927. And the other cardinal sin that Heidegger committed was he didn't have much to say about his National Socialism after the fact. And so he never did a mea culpa that I know of. And I'm no scholar of Heidegger, so, I haven't read all the Black Notebooks and later work. Mainly, I've worked with this book here for the past year. And I felt like I just had to start talking about it because the Heidegger-Castaneda connection, I think, is really valuable. And so, and also knowing German men, they don't ever say they're sorry. So there you go. If he even thought it, he never would have said it in any case. So that's the first poisoned well, is that Heidegger's background. The second poisoned well is Castaneda. Now, Castaneda wrote this series of books. He claims to have been taught by a Yaqui Indian brujo or medicine man or sorcerer, however you want to describe it. And many people have said, oh, well, there's inconsistencies in his narrative in the books. He couldn't have been in Mexico when he thought he was. And yeah, we're okay. That he couldn't have been in Mexico when he said he was, and this and that is wrong. And what I can say is that I've read these and worked with the ideas in here, the material in here enough to say it's valuable on its own, and I don't care if he made it all up while he was sitting in a bathroom stall in the library at the UCLA anthropology building. It doesn't matter to me. And so I got over that hurdle a long time ago. It works. And I'll tell you, there's things that come up, like if you're full tilt boogie on a 500 microgram acid trip and things go seriously fucking upside down on you, you will be glad to have studied Castaneda because stuff like that comes in real handy. And the next thing is, I will quote from Juan Matus, or Don Juan, and Don is not his first name, that's the honorific in Spanish, but Don Juan is to me a very real character. It's like Plato and Socrates. I'm not going to say Don Juan, the character that Castaneda cooked up in a novel. No, I will quote Don Juan, I will quote Don Gennaro, who is another sorcerer, as if they are independent people. So let's just handle that right now. So that's Castaneda. And then my own poisoned hermeneutic is that I've done one hell of a lot of psychedelic experiences. And so you can't believe me. So you can't believe Heidegger because he was a Nazi. You can't believe Castaneda because he made it all up. And you can't believe me because I've gotten stoned too many times. So it leaves you with, not much to go on unless you're interested in the source material on the subject here. So let's continue just a little bit longer. I think psychedelics have something to offer. And the problem has been that psychologists are untrustworthy and anecdotal experiences don't cut a lot of ice. And the books that have been written, Ram Dass and the Tibetan Book of the Dead and all this kind of stuff, it's not in English. And what I mean is it's not in Western terms. And so it's easy to discount it. It's just New Age stuff, whatever. And Heidegger is a hard-nosed, found on the philosophy shelf. Well, that is something different. So Heidegger provides a language and a methodology by which the psychedelic experience could come into this culture and have a philosophical basis. And that's the difference. It's the key. It's the bridge. Heidegger is the bridge between the old world and the new world, and psychedelics are part of that. And the thing I've seen about our culture here, especially in the United States, is that Europeans came over to this continent. But a continent has things to say to you. And if you think about when the British went to India, they built these little enclaves that looked like little English villages, and they lived in those. They didn't want to, they didn't want to know what's going on. They didn't want to know about the religion. They don't really want to know that. They just wanted to do what they had to do there, take what they wanted to take, and feel like they were still in England. And to a great degree, we've done that here in this country, in this continent. We don't really want to know about the peyote plants and the native people and their funny ideas. And so that's a related issue to the rejection of psychedelics, which the New World is a pretty psychedelic place compared to Europe and Europe's history of suppression. And so I want to talk about the bridge. I'm going to talk about the bridge between the New World and the Old World, and the psychedelic bridge from Heidegger and into Castaneda. And the other thing is, it's likely psychedelic people will tune into this before graduate students in philosophy. And speaking of philosophy, the only reason why Heidegger's on the philosophy shelf is because they don't know where else to put him. I consider him kind of an unphilosopher, and I'll explain more later. The backbone for how I'm going to structure these little videos is that I'll work through Heidegger's book as a structure to give it a flow. And then I will relate how what Heidegger had to say has deep similarities to what Castaneda was saying as we go along. And use Heidegger as the structure to structure how we move through this. So that's where we're at. And I hope you come along for the ride. And I don't know where all this is going to go exactly. In the spirit of Heidegger, this is an inquiry. It's a preliminary inquiry into what does all this mean, and what might it mean. So thank you. Thanks for coming along. Good night. So I have a little addendum of hermeneutical points. One is Carlos Castaneda. I'm only going to refer to the first 8 books of the series, which began with the Yaqui way of knowledge and ends with the power of silence. Castaneda wrote a few books after that, but they seem to be in a different voice. These first 8 books has a consistent voice from the author, and I think that those other books either diverged or they were put together by the estate from notes. I don't know. But anyway, the first 8 are the ones that I think count. And then as far as the Heidegger goes, this is the Macquarrie and Robinson edition of the book, which was recommended by Hubert Dreyfus. Now, Hubert Dreyfus was a professor of philosophy at UC Berkeley. And we're fortunate that he put a 28-hour auditing video of a complete course on Heidegger up on YouTube. And he recommends this version of Being in Time. So I've been very happy with it, not that I've read others. But and a good way to get into what is Heidegger about is to listen to those lectures. It's extensive, and it's a college-level course. The other thing about Heidegger is Heidegger has a reputation of being very obscure and difficult to understand, the most difficult philosopher of the 20th century. I don't believe that to be true at all. I think that the book is dense, but it's not opaque. And so I read it 2, 3, 4 pages at the most a day, and then thought about it. And it's not a book you can just plow through like a novel. And so I really recommend take your time with it, read a few pages and think about it. And what I've said about Heidegger is that there's nothing Heidegger has to say that you can't verify for yourself on the way to the store to buy milk and eggs or in your own backyard. The difficulty comes in he's explaining things at a level of detail you've maybe never considered before. And it might sound complicated, but when you sit and think about it, you think, well, okay, that's what he's talking about. I'm familiar with that. Of course you are. And so I'll have a following page with a little more information on these books, a little bibliography list here. Thank you very much.